What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing famous cursed movies. For most people, horror movies are scary enough as it is. Honestly, I grew up watching them, and for as far back as I can remember, I not only watched them, but I loved them. Still do to this day. I was 5 years old and had seen all of the Freddys and Jasons and all of the Halloweens that were out at that time. I've always heard rumors of alleged curses that were connected to some horror movies that make the thought of them even scarier, and honestly, that make the movies themselves seem even more sinister somehow. The curses include things like bizarre phenomena happening on set or to the actors or actresses in general, strange and horrible mishaps, weird accidents, and in some cases, even people dying. Horror movies in particular have a long history of being plagued by eerie and scary events happening behind the scenes, and many people wonder what it is about them that make them so prone to things like curses being attached to them. Because let's be real, if you've researched this subject or know anything about it, it's not an uncommon occurrence. In my opinion, it's like Nietzsche said, quote, "When you stare into the abyss stares back at you," end quote. And just like when I write my books, there's always a chance that delving into paranormal and otherworldly phenomenon will inadvertently bring that phenomenon right back to you in real life and off the pages of the novels and far away from the actual sets of the movies they're allegedly attached to. Everything I am about to discuss with you all here today is, of course, alleged, and I decided to put that little disclaimer in here so I don't have to keep saying the word allegedly. So today, I want to take a look at a few of the scarier movies that have made headlines, even if only in the paranormal community and or online, because of the alleged curses that have been attached to them. These movies have transcended the lines between fact and fiction because of their seeming ability to draw out some strange, supernatural, and sometimes evil and deadly forces from the imaginations of the people who put the films together and everyone involved in the making of it, and into the realities of those same people's everyday lives. I want to put one more small disclaimer. I mean no disrespect to the people that have been victim of these alleged curses, these deaths that have happened, or their family members. This is just a video trying to give information about a scary and creepy topic. I don't mean to offend anyone. I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but probably should, because people that don't know me and know my heart and aren't familiar with the work that I do may think I'm just trying to cash in on deaths, you know, and I don't want anyone to ever think that or feel that way and be victimized all over again. Without further ado, let's jump right in. We've got to start this list off by discussing a movie that earned the title "The Scariest Movie Ever Made," and that's a direct quote. And I agree with that sentiment, as it's the only horror movie ever that I've ever watched that I couldn't make it all the way through. Still to this day, I have not seen this movie in its entirety because of how it so terrified me. William Friedkin wrote the book The Exorcist, but it was William Peter Blatty's interpretation of it on film that we're all familiar with now. Ever since the movie's release in 1973, it's influenced pop culture and the horror genre and had so many people never wanting to even look at pea soup again, let alone eat it. I believe personally that the Exorcist movie needs no introduction, and I've covered on this channel right around this past Halloween, so Halloween of 2023, the exorcism of Roland Doe. And Roland Doe is the pseudonym that was given to the little boy whose possession the movie was based upon, because it is based upon true events. In the movie, it's a little girl, the little girl Reagan, but in real life, it was a boy. And if you missed that video, then please, after you watch this one, go ahead back and check that one out. For those of you unfamiliar with the case and with the book and the movie, The Exorcist follows two priests as they battle to free a seemingly innocent young girl from the horrors and ills of demonic possession. This movie is a masterclass of the genre and still has very far-reaching influences in the horror genre in general. The movie spawned a countless number of sequels, spin-offs, and cheap imitations, and because of all of that, in 2010, it was selected by the Library of Congress to be preserved as a work that is, quote, culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant, end quote. And that's true to this day. The reason we're discussing the film today, though, is not because of all of the accolades it's received or all of the spooky and creepy titles it's earned, but because it also has the distinction of having one of Hollywood's most famous evil curses looming all over it. behind the scenes of the movie was almost just as much of a frightening time for the people involved in the making of it as it was when they were in character and playing their parts. It has a long list of aforementioned freak occurrences, bad luck, horrible mishaps, and even deaths that were associated with this film. Honestly, guys, with this one, with everything going on involving the curse, there's so much to it, and there's so much that's said to have happened that I had a hard time finding where to start this discussion. Before filming even began, the production was plagued by countless setbacks, and many directors turned down the film, somewhat inexplicably. So Stanley Kubrick wouldn't do it, neither would Arthur Penn. Finally, William Blatty took on the task of directing the infamous movie, but that wasn't the end of the issues with making this film. The scenes set to take place in Iraq in the film were to be shot on location, meaning everyone who would be in those scenes would have to travel to the Middle East, and production was delayed considerably due to the extremely high heat and sickness that plagued everyone there. No one was immune. Aside from that, during filming, there was an inordinate number of fires on set, and they seemed to simply spring up out of nowhere and have no real cause or explanation, even after being professionally investigated. One of those fires burned down the entire set of the home where most of the movie takes place. One room in that home remained totally untouched and completely unscathed by that fire, though, and that was Reagan's room, the little girl in the movie played by Linda Blair, who was the subject of the possession in the first place. That room is where all of the possession scenes were filmed. There was a scene where the woman who played Reagan's mother, actress Ellen Bernstein, permanently injured her back during a scene where she was struggling with the possessed little girl. Linda Blair also suffered a very serious back injury when the harness that was set up to maneuver her to flail and flap around on her bed malfunctioned. Another instance that can only be described as a freak accident was when a young kid who was the son of one of the actors was just hanging out on set and got hit by a motorbike and was immediately hospitalized. Believe it or not, these occurrences happened so much that several exorcisms were actually performed on the set itself in order to try and keep whatever was causing the issues at bay. So they were bringing in real priests and doing real exorcisms on the set. That's how bad it got. It's believed that the people involved in the making and creating of this film had summoned something, and you'll never convince me otherwise of that. You have to know what you're doing when dealing in any way with the paranormal, and especially when there are demons and demonic forces involved. The exorcisms were also performed due to widespread belief by most of the cast and crew that something was trying to stop that movie from being made. Besides all of the horrific accidents and strange mishaps, of which I named only a few here, there are way more than what I mentioned here because I wanted to delve into more than just one movie. But besides all of that, there were several strange deaths surrounding the production of the film as well. The most well-publicized death, at least as far as what I could find in my research, was that of actor Jack McGowan. He played a director in the film named Burke Dennings, but shortly after filming for the movie wrapped, he died of the flu, of all things. There are also two characters who die in the film, and the men who played those characters also died in real life shortly after the movie had been completed. People like to attribute the death of actress Vasiliki Meliaros to the curse of the film by mentioning that she also died right after the film was released. But here's where you have to be careful in believing everything you read, because I looked deeper into that and I found that Vasiliki was 90 years old when she passed away, and she merely died of natural causes. I'm not 100% sure, but from photos, I believe she is the woman who played Damien the priest's mother in his visions from the devil. Damie, why you do this to me, Damie? Forgive the poor accent, but that lady. She does seem to be the only exception, though, and she's only one of 9 cast or crew members who died either during or immediately after the filming and making of this movie. All of them were a part of the movie in some way. Some other strange deaths were those of relatives to the cast and crew of the movie. Actor Max von Sydow's brother and Linda Blair's grandfather also died and now have their deaths associated with the curse of this production. Max played Father Marin, and I couldn't find how his brother died, but I did find that a night watchman and a special effects expert also died tragically, along with many others. Oddly enough, even after The Exorcist was released, there would still be so much trouble and bizarre events plaguing this film. When it premiered at the Metropolitan Theater in Rome, The weather was so horrible, with torrential downpours and lightning striking everywhere. Everyone who was in attendance was downright miserable because of the weather outside. So not too long after all of the guests were finally out of the abominable weather and had filed into the theater for the screening, a bolt of lightning struck one of the two 16th century churches that were nearby the theater, which effectively ended up dislodging a giant 8-foot tall cross that fell and crashed down into the plaza right in front of the theater, which scared the patrons and set them even more on edge than they already were in coming to see this very unique for the time, provocative for the time, terrifying movie. Seriously though, what are the odds that it would be a cross? Once the movie was officially and widely released into theaters, there were immediate repercussions and a flood of complaints started to pour in about people becoming sick and dizzy while watching the movie. Patrons were also having seizures, faintings, becoming violently ill, and having serious and severe panic attacks. One woman was so bothered and scared by the imagery of the film that she left the theater and refused to stay and watch until the end. She tripped on her way out the door and fell and broke her jaw. The movie was also blamed for a great number of people unaliving themselves throughout the 70s, with some people suggesting that the imagery in the film was just too gruesome, too much for regular people to handle, and they were unaliving themselves because of it. Either that, or perhaps people were attributing those deaths and all the mishaps and eerie events during screenings to a curse that surrounded the movie because of the content within it. Now, side note, I don't think it's impossible that this movie opened the door to something, okay? And they were reenacting an allegedly real in my opinion, exorcist that had happened. So did they reawaken whatever was going on with Roland Doe? We can invite evil and the demonic in simply by watching movies about it. I know that's terrifying, but that's why we have to keep ourselves surrounded by light, and I talk about that a lot in my live streams. So not impossible that all of these unalivings were possibly connected to the viewing of this film. Famous evangelist Billy Graham was so convinced that the film was indeed cursed that he went so far as to allege that the celluloid itself, which I believe is the substance, the reels that the films were made with and then played in the theaters, that it was somehow saturated and imbued with the essence of evil and the power of the devil himself. On top of everything else I just mentioned here already, was the absolute and total breakdown of the actress that played the possessed child in the movie, 14-year-old Linda Blair, who had a profound mental breakdown in the years following the film's release. Once an ambitious young actress with a promising career ahead of her, Linda ended up being arrested on drug charges in 1977, and she ended up going on a rant about how disturbing the whole production of the movie had been, not only to her, but to everyone involved in the making of it. In fact, it had been such a traumatic experience for the young girl that she got out of acting altogether, became a recluse, and faded somewhat into obscurity for a very long time. She also allegedly vowed to never have children because of the effects of the character she played had on her long term. Years later, it was discovered that the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was obsessed with the Exorcist movies, in particular Part 3, which he allegedly watched over and over and over again before killing his victims. This curse is so far-reaching and widespread, seemingly spanning over a few decades, that there's an entire 2-hour documentary about it. Whether or not these were all just eerie coincidences, or if there's something actually to this all or not, is for you guys entirely to judge for yourselves. However, I will say that I don't think I need to say what I think, considering how most people already know how I feel about coincidences when it comes to the paranormal and so many other things. So let's move on now. In 1976, another movie that followed in the same vein as The Exorcist and discussed demons, Satan, and the occult, as well as some possession, that went on to become a classic in the horror genre and spawn its own remake and several sequels, is the movie The Omen. The Omen was directed by Richard Donner and starred Gregory Peck, and it was released in 1976, so just 3 years after the original Exorcist movie had come out. The film follows the struggles of a family who realize that their adopted son is the Antichrist through a series of mysterious events and ominous deaths. Unlike The Exorcist, The Omen was a major commercial and critical success, and it even earned several Academy Awards nominations. It won an Oscar for Best Original Score for Jerry Goldsmith's haunting and iconic music, and it also spawned 2 sequels and a remake, as I've already mentioned. The Omen has also become well known, though, for a series of events surrounding its making that are perhaps even more spooky and ominous than the movie itself was. So the high strangeness started back when Harvey Bernhard's friend Bob Munger told him about the concept of the film in 1973, which was years before the production had started. Harvey liked the idea, and he went to great lengths to get the movie into production. Munger had only mentioned it to his friend and hadn't really thought that anything would come of it, and at the idea of the movie actually being made into a major Hollywood movie, he became overwhelmed with a sick feeling of dread and uneasiness, which became more and more unbearable with each further step of action that was taken to get this project off the ground. David Seltzer was already working on the script, and Munger was becoming more and more concerned and panicked as each word was written. Bob Munger said that he had become so sick with the idea of the film being made from his ideas, and he claimed that years later he tried to warn Harvey Bernhard about it. He stated, quote, "I warned Harvey at the time. I said, if you make this movie, you're going to have some problems. If the devil's greatest single weapon is to be invisible and you're going to do something which is going to take away his invisibility to millions of people, he's not going to want that to happen," end quote. He turned out to be right, at least in some ways, or in theory, and his warning became somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. 2 months before filming started, the star of the movie, Gregory Peck's son in real life, took his own life by shooting himself. Right after he had gotten the news, he was on a plane to London that got struck by lightning. Though it was certainly a very scary ordeal, it ended up being non-fatal. Lightning and its wrath would become something of a theme with this movie and would show up at various points during the film. Screenwriter David Seltzer would be in a plane that was also struck by lightning on more than one occasion, as well as the executive producer Mace Newfield having the same thing happen to him once in a totally separate incident from all the others. The producer, Harvey Bernhard, was struck by lightning while walking down a street in Rome, but the actual lightning bolt missed him by a fraction of an inch, so he still caught a bit of the shock, but it wasn't fatal or anywhere near close. It's hard to equate all of these potentially fatal lightning strikes as nothing more than mere coincidence, but I digress, and as always, you all need to make your own deductions and decisions about it. The filming of this movie was also plagued by car crashes, with several of the cast and crew getting into wrecks during the shoot, including Gregory Peck and the director of the film himself. The IRA also bombed a portion of the hotel where the director and producers were staying during filming on location in Ireland. Also, a plane that had been reserved to fly Peck and other cast members to Israel so they could also film on location there was switched out for another plane at the very last minute, but no one complained later on because that's when the plane they were originally supposed to have been on, the one originally commissioned for them to fly to Israel on, ended up crashing in spectacular fashion and killing everyone on board. There were various freak accidents that happened to the stuntmen, and there was a severe mauling of one of the film's animal handlers by a well-trained Rottweiler that had been used for one of the scenes in the movie, where a pack of ferocious wild dogs chased 2 of the main characters through a cemetery. Obviously, everything here combined that I just mentioned, and so much more that I didn't even talk about, would make the cast and crew very shaken up, and especially when things like the mauling on set and all of the freak accidents and occurrences with various cast and crew members, it made everyone on edge and started to make them think that it was some sort of curse or severe run of bad luck that was associated with making the movie because of the content within the film itself. Producer Bernhard started wearing a very large cross very prominently when he was anywhere near set. Years later, he talked about it by saying, quote, "I wasn't about to take any chances. The devil was at work, and he didn't want that film made. We were dealing in areas we didn't know about, and later on in the picture, it got worse, worse, and worse," end quote. Just like with The Exorcist before it, even after filming wrapped on the movie The Omen, the curse would not relinquish its grip. Just like The Exorcist before it, even after filming wrapped on the movie The Omen, the curse would not relinquish its grip. 2 weeks after they were finished filming, one of the animal handlers, so a different one than the one that was mauled by the Rottweilers, had been working on set for the movie, was killed when he was pulled into a lion enclosure by one of his own trained lions and was mauled to death by it. 2 other crew members would go on to be involved in bizarre accidents just a year after the film was released. Oddly enough, they were both working in Holland on a film about World War II called A Bridge Too Far, which was directed by Richard Attenborough. In the first incident, a stuntman named Alf Joint fell when performing a very simple and routine stunt that he had done thousands of times before and had to be hospitalized. Later on, he would tell people that he felt as though he had been pushed by some unseen force and that he hadn't fallen or slipped at all. Perhaps even more sinister was what would end up happening to the special effects supervisor for the movie The Omen. His name was John Richardson, and he had been responsible for some of the most noteworthy, unforgettable, and imaginatively gruesome moments in the movie. The good stuff, right? Among these scenes was an iconic moment when the character of a photographer, who was played by actor David Warner, is brutally decapitated by a flying sheet of glass. Richardson had been driving in the Netherlands along with his set assistant for that same movie, A Bridge Too Far, along with his set assistant named Liz Moore, when they were involved in a head-on collision that was horrific and brutal, and a bit too close to home considering that aforementioned scene with the flying sheet of glass. Apparently, during that horrific collision, the wheel of the car sawed up into the passenger seat, which all but cut Moore in half and then beheaded her. Richardson was mortified and left in a state of total panic and shock. The crash is said to have happened when they were near a sign that announced being just 66.6 kilometers away from a Dutch town called Ommen. O-M-M-E-N. It also seems like the original Curse of the Omen movie followed the name all the way into 2006 when the remake was filmed as well. Director John Moore said that 2 days of filming were lost and that the malfunctioning camera that caused the delays had displayed the error message 666. That was odd because that wasn't an error message the machine had ever been programmed to show, and it didn't exist in the error messages database for the equipment at all. Actor Liev Schreiber was bitten by a dog on set, and co-star Pete Postlethwaite's brother died of a heart attack during a card game, allegedly after having drawn 3 sixes. To this day, Moore is insistent that something supernatural and evil had hung over the production of the remake, and he even discusses some of it in the DVD commentary for the film. So another one of the most notorious supposed real-life curses behind a movie is linked to yet another story that discusses demons, demonic possession, and this particular movie came out before the original Exorcist and Omen movies. So this was the first one made. Rosemary's Baby was a movie that had pioneered the popularity of these types of films, and in 1968 it was released into theaters everywhere. Directed by Roman Polanski and produced by William Castle, it follows the story of a young and pregnant wife whose husband had made a pact with devil worshippers to trade his firstborn son to Satan in order to remain successful in his career. But the young wife, Rosemary, she has no idea about this. William Castle had only been known basically for B-movie dreck up to that point. Rosemary's Baby was released to massive critical success, which then catapulted him into an area of respectability in film, and it still remains a very highly honored and regarded horror classic. It won awards, it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry, and it has become a fixture on countless scariest movies of all times list. It also spawned numerous imitations throughout the years, but nothing I've seen has yet to come close to the original, and I do think it's a great cult classic. MU said, quote, "Unlike the other films mentioned here so far, the production of Rosemary's Baby itself went off mostly without a hitch, although Castle became more and more convinced that there was something ominous, a certain sense of dread hanging over the set. It was not until after the film's release that things became truly bizarre and unnerving, and strange events would start to plague those involved with the film. It started with a deluge of bitter, hate-fueled letters from viewers received by Castle, which denounced the movie and ranged from accusing him of Satanism and witchcraft to earnest wishes laced with vitriol that he would die and rot in hell. At one point, the increasingly disturbed Castle would receive around 50 of these venomous, hateful letters a day, to the point that he actually began to start fearing for his life, and he started to really believe that the movie was emanating some sort of dark force, once proclaiming that he had, quote, unleashed evil upon the world, end quote. In the midst of this flood of hate mail, Castle came down with a painful bout of kidney stones and was hospitalized. Of course, he blamed his deteriorating condition on the film, and over the next few months he would be in and out of the emergency room in excruciating pain, to the point that he famously exclaimed during one such visit, "Rosemary, for God's sake, drop the knife." As Castle became more and more fearful and paranoid about the film he had created and the long-term effects it would have on him and so many others involved, he found out that the 38-year-old Polish composer named Krzysztof Komeda, who had created the haunting score for Rosemary's Baby, had in fact been hospitalized in the same hospital where he had dealt with the kidney stones. Only Krzysztof was there with a cerebral hemorrhage, which ultimately killed him with a blood clot to the brain. Many do find it creepy that Rosemary's friend in the movie, a character named Hutch, died of that very same thing. That death and the uncanny coincidences associated with it, along with the increasingly threatening letters he was still receiving, not to mention his chronic urinary tract issues, caused Castles to state, quote, "The story of Rosemary's Baby was happening in life. Witches, all of them, were casting their spell, and I was becoming one of the principal players." End quote. Krzysztof Komeda's death was by no means the end of this alleged curse that surrounded this movie, and it seemingly only got more frightening as it set its sights directly on the director, Roman Polanski himself. Rosemary's Baby had been Polanski's big break into fame, and the resounding success of the movie seemingly shot his star right into the stratosphere. He became one of the most talked about directors in show business practically overnight, and to add to his personal successes and his overall elation was the fact that his gorgeous young wife, Hollywood starlet Sharon Tate, was 8 months pregnant with their first child. However, in the midst of this meteoric rise to fame and fortune, Polanski was out of town when the curse of the omen would strike. While he was out of town, his wife and some friends, hairdresser Jay Sebring, Katie Folger, and screenwriter Wojciech Frykowski, were having a party at hers and Polanski's home in Benedict Canyon, California. The night was perfectly normal and everyone had a great time, but at about midnight, a group of young women who were obviously high on some sort of drugs were led by a man named Tex Watson into the home after they had all been ordered to kill by their leader, the now notorious Charles Manson. During the entrance, Tex said, quote, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business," end of quote. The group then went to work stabbing everyone in the home, including a very pregnant Sharon Tate. She was said to have begged the group to spare the life of her unborn child, as she lay there in a pool of her own blood, in the blood of that same unborn son. But she was brutally murdered by Susan Atkins, one of the women in the group, who then proceeded to not only drink her blood, but use it to write the word pig on the walls of the home. I'm disgusted even talking about this. There's a reason I never talked about the Manson murders before. Sharon Tate is the main reason, but Rosemary's Baby came up in the list, so forgive me. It was a gruesome, disgusting, and sickening crime that shocked and haunted the nation, and it cemented Charles Manson as a real and true psychopath. It would obviously forever haunt Roman Polanski and the families of the other victims. The murders also fueled the speculation about the curse of the Rosemary's Baby movie and how it must have somehow overcome the killers and led them to that house that night at that time. An even more unbelievable conspiracy was that Polanski himself had made a deal with the devil for success, fame, and fortune, as did the father in the movie, and that his and Sharon's unborn child was the price he paid. I'm not saying that's true. In fact, I say with confidence it's not. But I can see why people might think that or put that out there. People who don't think things through before they state their opinions and think about what a person might be going through before they accuse them of something like that, the implications of it. I do get it. It's our own flawed humanity at work. There is another connection to this curse, though it's somewhat tenuous, but no less intriguing, and it involves the death of Beatle John Lennon, whom we've discussed in a few of our other videos about curses here on this channel, and I have to admit, I was kind of surprised to see his name come up here with this one, with the Rosemary's Baby curse. John Lennon was friends with Roman Polanski, and Charles Manson eventually claimed that he had gotten the inspiration for the murders from hidden messages in the Beatles' White Album. But John Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono lived in the Dakota building, which was chosen as the location of the film Rosemary's Baby because of its gothic appearance. Outside of the building in 1980 is where Mark David Chapman killed John Lennon by shooting him. Chapman admitted that he prepared himself for the murder by listening to the Beatles' White Album incessantly, also while naked, and praying for demons to enter his body and give him the power to do it, to kill. This was even stranger to me, as we should all know by now that no one needs to be given the power to kill. We all just have it as human beings, but thought that maybe he had meant to ask for the strength to do it, or the stomach to do it, maybe. I digress, okay? And I know it's a small detail, but it stuck out to me nonetheless. Though the murder of John Lennon isn't directly associated with the curse of Rosemary's Baby, it is said to fall under the umbrella of it. Castle spent the rest of his life regretting ever making that movie, even though it's the one that made him famous in the end. He died in 1977, but was absolutely terrified of the alleged curse and of the movie itself until the day he died. Even when Rosemary's Baby won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress and was nominated for the Best Screenplay, Castle was too scared to attend the ceremony itself, and he more or less disowned the entire film. When asked why he had forsaken the accolades in the picture itself, he said, quote, "All my life I had yearned for the applause, approval, and recognition of my peers. And when the awards were being passed out, I no longer cared. I was at home, very frightened of Rosemary's Baby," end quote. So the last movie I was going to discuss with you all here today was that of the movie Poltergeist, right? The curse of the Poltergeist movies. And actually all of those movies, 1, 2, and 3, and probably the remake too, but I'm not sure about that one. But we've discussed those already in previous videos about cursed movies, and so I saw no need to repeat any of it. Go back, check out the other videos if you guys want that information. Brent Swanser asked the questions and basically summed it all up by saying it better than I think I ever could have. Quote, "Are the phenomena, incidents, and deaths surrounding these troubled productions just connecting the dots, our psyche queued up by the horror portrayed on the screen and seeking to imbue these movies with some form of horror in real life? Are these curses merely the product of spooky coincidences and forming non-existent patterns and relationships between these movies and the weirdness and tragedies they just happen to have been befallen by? Or are there truly strange connections and insidious occurrences pervading these films, orchestrated by inscrutable mysterious forces that we may never fully understand and were perhaps never meant to? As long as these movie curses continue to be talked about, there will doubtless be those who wonder at the answers to these questions. Whether one believes in literal curses or not, and whether they really exist or not, one thing that seems certain is that knowing about these dire tragedies and creepy accidents behind the scenes imbues these films with a certain menace that alters the way one may view them, making these scary movies even scarier than they were before." End quote. Like I said, I honestly don't think I could have said it better myself. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere, if that's when you watch. Spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and please make sure your notification bell is turned on. So many people have been coming to me being like, "Gemma, I'm not getting notified of live streams. I'm not getting notified of new videos." Make sure your bell's on, because even if you turned it on once before, YouTube has a habit of flicking them off. I don't know why or how it happens, but it does happen, and it happens often. Also, in the description box, you can find the information for most weeks when my pre-recorded videos come out, when the live streams are going to be. Of course, sometimes the schedule will change based on things we can't control, but for the most part, it stays pretty consistent. I always put out 2 pre-recorded videos on Mondays, 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 12 noon Eastern Time. The 12 noon Eastern Time videos only stays public for 24 hours before going back into a members-only capacity for only members to watch. I do that to make sure that everyone gets a chance to see everything, even if you can't afford being a member. And also because I don't have enough members to just do members-only videos, because then it will drag the algorithm down and won't push my videos out. YouTube is very funny and funky and strange with the way it works for smaller creators who don't make a lot of money like myself. Also, in the description box, you can find links for all of my books on Kindle, paperback, and Audible. If you want a signed or autographed copy, email me, GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Also, email me for any other correspondence, information, questions, comments, concerns, all of that stuff. And if you have any of your own personal encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, otherworldly, extraterrestrial, etc. for my Listener Encounters series. Ways to donate to the channel: PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link. If y'all just want to send me a gift, there's crystals and decks and all kinds of good stuff on there. If you have suggestions for what you'd like to see next, it does take me a few weeks to get a video put together based on a suggestion, because I do a lot of research that goes into these videos that I don't think so many people are aware of. But email me the suggestions, or if it's a short one, you can put it right in the comments. Please don't leave your encounters in the comments. They will get lost and I won't be able to use them. And I do try to get back to as many comments as I possibly can, but I do get a lot, so sometimes that's harder to do than other times. Please support my shorts. I only started doing YouTube shorts a few months ago. I have so many of them out and the views are just very low. Even the monthly astrology shorts, guys, they do take time, okay? And I do them for y'all's entertainment. Some of them I do just because I'm feeling goofy or silly. I'm trying to make you guys laugh and be funny. Some of them are more serious. I do them for you all, just like I do these pre-recordeds. And when people don't watch them, it takes me 7 to 10 hours to do one of these videos you just watched. From start to finish. From finding the idea, doing all of the research, fact-checking, writing the script, filming it, putting it through editing, getting it uploaded. That takes a lot of time. And I do that twice a week for y'all. So if you guys aren't interested in the stuff that I'm covering, or if, you know, it's not interesting enough for y'all to watch all the way through, talk to me about how I can change that. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If no one told you today, you're amazing, you're incredible, you can do anything you set your mind to. And don't ever let anyone make you feel like you can't, okay? If you're a light worker, if you're an empath, you probably do have a lot of toxic narcissism in your orbit. But come into my live streams, email me, send me a private message. Let's talk about how to work through that. That's one of the things I do here on this channel professionally, and I don't think a lot of people know that. I also offer personal intuitive oracle readings for $20 a pop to my PayPal or Cash App. If you want a tarot / oracle, it's a little bit more. If you want to do an hour one-on-one, it's a little bit more, but my rates do start at $20. So, I mean, that's cheaper than anyone else you're going to find on YouTube, aside from the people doing it for donations only, which I used to do, and I was doing 50 readings a month to make $20. So, you know, it didn't really work out. Either way, guys, I believe in you. I got your back. If nobody told you that today, or if you feel like nobody does, this girl does. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.